Everyone laughed when the Chinese billionaire mocked the black waiter, until he replied in Chinese. The crystal chandeliers of the Golden Phoenix restaurant sparkled like diamonds above the most expensive dining room in all of San Francisco. Each table was covered with silk cloth that cost more than most people made in a month. The walls were decorated with ancient Chinese paintings worth millions of dollars. This was not just a restaurant. It was a temple where the richest people in the world came to show off their power and money. On this cold December evening, the air was thick with the smell of expensive perfume and the sound of fake laughter. At the center table sat Zhang Wei, a woman whose name made stock markets tremble and governments listen carefully. She was 45 years old but looked 30, thanks to the best doctors money could buy. Her black dress cost more than a car, and the diamond necklace around her neck could feed a small town for a year. She controlled a technology empire worth $90 billion, and she wanted everyone to know it. Marcus Williams moved between the tables like a shadow, carrying plates of food that cost hundreds of dollars each. He was 28 years old, tall and strong, with hands that told stories of hard work. His waiter uniform was perfectly pressed, his shoes polished until they shone like mirrors. To everyone in that room, he was invisible, just another black man serving rich people their expensive meals. They didn't know that behind his calm brown eyes lived a mind that spoke 5 languages perfectly. They didn't know that he had once stood in front of the United Nations, translating for world leaders. They didn't know that his fall from grace had been swift and cruel, leaving him here, serving people who saw him as less than human. As he poured water into Zhang Wei's glass, she didn't even look at him. To her, he was furniture that moved. Nothing more. But tonight would be different. Tonight, the furniture would speak back, and when it did, the whole world would hear its voice. Zhang Wei was showing off to her dinner guests like a peacock spreading its colorful feathers. Around her table sat 5 American technology executives, each one desperate to get a piece of her massive fortune through business deals. They hung on her every word, laughing at jokes that weren't funny, nodding at ideas that made no sense. Money has a way of making people lose their dignity, and these men had sold theirs long ago. "You Americans are so soft," Zhang Wei said in English, her accent thick but her meaning clear. "In China, we know how to make people work. We don't waste time with all this equality nonsense." The executives shifted uncomfortably in their seats, but none dared to disagree. They needed her contracts more than they needed their self-respect. Then Zhang Wei noticed Marcus approaching with their main course, and a cruel smile spread across her face. She turned to her assistant and began speaking in Mandarin Chinese, thinking nobody else could understand. "Look at this monkey they have serving us food," she said, her voice dripping with poison. "In my country, we wouldn't let someone like him near our food. Black skin means dirty hands, dirty mind. But Americans pretend they're all equal. What a joke." Marcus's hands didn't shake as he placed the plate in front of her. His face remained perfectly calm, like a lake without ripples. But inside, every word was being carved into his memory like letters on stone. He understood every syllable, every insult, every display of ignorance wrapped in expensive clothes. 3 years ago, Marcus had been Dr. Marcus Williams, one of the youngest professors of international relations at Stanford University. He spoke Mandarin Chinese so perfectly that native speakers often thought he was born in Beijing. His research on Chinese-American business culture had won awards, and companies paid him thousands of dollars just to give speeches. But then came the accusation. A jealous colleague named Richard Chen had planted evidence suggesting Marcus had stolen research funds. The investigation took 8 months. 8 months of newspaper headlines calling him a thief. 8 months of friends disappearing like smoke. 8 months of watching his life crumble like a sandcastle hit by waves. When they finally proved he was innocent, when they discovered Richard had created fake documents, it was too late. Universities wouldn't hire someone who had been investigated, even if he was innocent. Companies didn't want the bad publicity. Marcus went from teaching in lecture halls to serving in dining halls, from discussing philosophy to delivering food. Zhang Wei continued her performance, getting bolder with each glass of wine she drank. These people, she said in Mandarin, gesturing at Marcus with her chopsticks, they think they deserve the same respect as us. Can you imagine? Someone who probably can't even read thinking they're equal to someone who runs a global empire. Her assistant, a nervous young man named James, tried to change the subject, but Zhang Wei was enjoying herself too much. No, let me educate these Americans about reality, she said, switching back to English but continuing to gesture at Marcus. You see, in business, there is natural order. Some people born to lead, some people born to serve. It's genetics, you understand? Like how some dogs are smart, some dogs are not so smart. The American executives were turning red with embarrassment, but their greed kept them silent. Marcus continued serving, his movements precise and professional. Each insult was adding fuel to a fire that had been burning inside him for months. The fire of injustice. The fire of being judged by appearance instead of ability. The fire that would soon explode and burn down Zhang Wei's tower of arrogance. The dinner continued like a slow torture session, with Zhang Wei as the torturer and Marcus as her victim. She criticized the way he walked, saying in Mandarin that, they all walk like animals, not humans. She mocked his careful movements, telling her assistant that, you can dress them up, but they're still savages underneath. She even took a photo of him serving the table and posted it on her social media with a caption in Chinese that read, "Amazing what passes for service staff in America. No wonder their economy is failing." The other diners in the restaurant were starting to notice the tension. Some looked away, uncomfortable but unwilling to intervene. Others watched with the sick fascination of people viewing a car crash. Marcus served the dessert course with the same calm professionalism he had shown all evening. But those who looked closely could see something had changed in his eyes. There was a light there now, like the first spark before lightning strikes. He was no longer just enduring. He was preparing. As Zhang Wei prepared to leave, she decided to deliver one final humiliation. She stood up and addressed Marcus directly in English, speaking slowly as if talking to a child. You, waiter boy, you know what I am. I am Zhang Wei of Wei Technologies. My company worth more than your entire race will make in 1,000 years. You should be honored to serve me. Maybe I give you big tip so you can feed your probably many children from many different women. The restaurant fell completely silent. Even the kitchen staff had stopped working, sensing something momentous was about to happen. Marcus set down the bill he was carrying, straightened his back, and for the first time that evening, smiled. It wasn't a servant's smile. It was the smile of a teacher about to deliver a lesson that would never be forgotten. Ms. Zhang, he said, his voice clear and strong, I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding. Then, switching to perfect Mandarin Chinese, with the refined accent of Beijing's educated elite, he continued, you see, I've understood every word you've said tonight. Every insult, every racist comment, every display of ignorance disguised as superiority. The color drained from Zhang Wei's face like water from a broken dam. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. The American executives looked confused, not understanding the Chinese but recognizing that something seismic had just occurred. Marcus continued in Mandarin, his pronunciation so perfect that even Zhang Wei's assistant gasped in amazement. My name is Dr. Marcus Williams. I hold a doctorate in international relations from Harvard University, with a specialization in Chinese economic philosophy. I've written 3 books on Sino-American trade relations. I've lectured at Beijing University, Shanghai Tech, and Tsinghua. I was personally invited by Premier Li to advise on the Belt and Road Initiative. I speak Mandarin, Cantonese, Japanese, Korean, and French fluently. And yes, for the last 6 months, I've been working as a waiter. He paused, letting each word sink in like nails into wood. Not because I'm inferior, but because sometimes life tests us in ways we don't expect. A false accusation destroyed my academic career. But it didn't destroy my knowledge, my dignity, or my worth as a human being. Zhang Wei stumbled backward, grabbing the table for support. That's impossible. You're lying. You're just a... But she couldn't finish the sentence. The words she had been throwing around so carelessly all evening now stuck in her throat like thorns. Marcus pulled out his phone and showed her a photo. It was him, standing next to the Chinese premier at an economic forum, both men smiling and shaking hands. This was taken 2 years ago, when I was advising your government on technology transfer policies. Policies that, ironically, helped your company secure several international patents. The American executives were now on their feet, recognition dawning on their faces. Robert Chen, the CEO of Pacific Tech, gasped, "My God, you're the Marcus Williams. I read your book on Chinese investment strategies. It changed how I do business." Zhang Wei's legs were shaking. But why didn't you say something? Why did you let me?" Marcus's expression hardened. "Why? Because I wanted to see who you really are when you think no one important is watching. You've shown not just me, but everyone here, that your wealth hasn't bought you class, your power hasn't brought you wisdom, and your success hasn't taught you humanity." The restaurant manager, Anthony Rossini, had been watching from the kitchen door. Now he stepped forward, his face pale with recognition. "Professor Williams? Is it really you? You gave a lecture at my son's graduation. He still talks about how you changed his life." Marcus nodded graciously, then turned back to Zhang Wei. "You spoke about genetic superiority, about natural order, about how some people are born to lead and others to serve. But here's what your expensive education didn't teach you: respect isn't determined by skin color or bank accounts. It's earned through character, through how we treat those we believe can do nothing for us." Zhang Wei tried to salvage something from the wreckage of her dignity. I could destroy you. I have connections, influence. One phone call and you'll never work anywhere again." Marcus actually laughed, a sound that made Zhang Wei flinch. "Ms. Zhang, I've already been destroyed once by someone's lies and connections. I survived. I learned. And I discovered something important: when you've lost everything and rebuilt from nothing, you become unbreakable." He pulled out his phone again, this time showing a recording app that had been running since the beginning of dinner. "I've recorded everything you said tonight. Every racist comment in Mandarin, thinking you were safe in your linguistic bubble. Every theory about racial superiority. Every moment of casual cruelty." Zhang Wei's face went from white to green. You can't. That's illegal." Marcus smiled sadly. "Actually, California is a two-party consent state for recordings, but there's an exception for gathering evidence of discrimination and hate speech. My lawyer, yes, I still have one, a friend who believed in me when everyone else didn't, has already confirmed that your comments tonight constitute both." The implications hit Zhang Wei like a tsunami. If those recordings got out, her company would lose billions in American contracts. The Chinese government, sensitive about their international image, would distance themselves from her. She would become toxic to everyone who mattered. "Please," she whispered, all arrogance evaporated. I didn't mean. I was just." But Marcus wasn't interested in her excuses. "You meant every word. The only thing you didn't mean was to get caught." The other diners in the restaurant had formed a circle around them, many recording with their phones. This would be on social media within minutes, viral within hours. Zhang Wei's humiliation would be global and permanent. But Marcus wasn't finished with his lesson. "You want to know the ironic part," he said, switching to English so everyone could understand. 3 years ago, I was invited to evaluate Wei Technologies for a potential partnership with the U.S. Department of Defense. I wrote a favorable report, praising your company's innovation and ethical standards. That report helped you secure contracts worth $2 billion. He stepped closer, his voice dropping to almost a whisper, but in the silence of the restaurant, everyone heard every word. I helped build your success, Ms. Zhang. The black waiter you called a monkey, whose intelligence you mocked, whose humanity you dismissed, I helped make you rich. And tonight, with your own words and your own prejudice, you've destroyed everything I helped you build. Zhang Wei's assistant, James, who had been silent all evening, suddenly spoke up. I quit, he said simply. I've been recording your comments for months, thinking I was crazy for being offended. You're a brilliant businesswoman, Ms. Zhang, but you're a terrible human being. He turned to Marcus. Professor Williams, I took your online course on international relations 2 years ago. You probably don't remember me, but you responded to every single one of my questions, even the stupid ones. You treated a nobody student with more respect than she treats everyone around her. The American executives were backing away from Zhang Wei like she had a contagious disease. They pulled out their phones, making calls to their legal departments, canceling meetings, distancing themselves from the toxic scandal that was about to explode. Robert Chen approached Marcus with genuine remorse. Professor, I'm ashamed that I sat there and said nothing. I was a coward, choosing money over morality. You've reminded me that success without integrity is just failure with a bigger bank account. Marcus looked around the room at all the faces watching him. Some with admiration, some with shame, all with a new understanding. I want everyone here to understand something, he said, his voice carrying the authority of a professor in his classroom. What happened tonight isn't just about one racist billionaire. It's about all of us. Every time we stay silent when we witness injustice, we become part of it. Every time we choose profit over principles, we lose a piece of our soul. Ms. Zhang isn't unique in her prejudices. She's just unique in being caught expressing them. He turned back to Zhang Wei, who was now crying, her perfect makeup running down her face in black streams. I'm not going to release these recordings, Ms. Zhang. Not because you deserve mercy, but because I believe in redemption. Even for someone like you. But understand this, I'm keeping them. If I ever hear of you discriminating against anyone, anywhere, for any reason, the whole world will hear what you said tonight. The relief on Zhang Wei's face was mixed with disbelief. You're really not going to destroy me? Marcus shook his head. Destroying you would be easy. Teaching you might actually accomplish something. You have 48 hours to make a public apology and a $50 million donation to scholarships for underprivileged minorities. Not because I'm forcing you, but because if you have any hope of salvaging your reputation after all these witnesses post about tonight, you need to show genuine change. Zhang Wei nodded frantically, agreeing to anything that might save her from complete ruin. But Marcus had one more thing to say. And Ms. Zhang. The next time you see someone serving you food, cleaning your office, or doing any job you consider beneath you, remember this moment. Remember that you never know who you're really talking to. That waiter might be a former professor. That janitor might speak more languages than you. That security guard might have more dignity in his little finger than you have in your entire portfolio. The manager, Anthony Rossini, stepped forward. Professor Williams, I would be honored if you would accept a partnership in this restaurant. Not as a waiter, but as our cultural consultant and part owner. Your presence here tonight has taught us all a lesson we desperately needed to learn. Marcus considered for a moment, then smiled. I'll accept, on one condition. We establish a program where we hire people who, like me, have faced false accusations or unfortunate circumstances. We give them a chance to rebuild, to prove that falling down doesn't mean staying down. The room erupted in spontaneous applause. Even some of Zhang Wei's executives were clapping, finally free from the spell of her money and able to express their true feelings. Zhang Wei stood alone in the center of the room, isolated by her own arrogance, learning that money can buy many things, but it cannot buy respect, cannot erase words once spoken, and cannot protect you when your true character is revealed. As Zhang Wei left the restaurant, her head bowed in the deepest humiliation of her life, Marcus called out one last time. Ms. Zhang, there's an old Chinese proverb I'm sure you know, the tall tree catches much wind. You built your tree very tall on the unstable ground of prejudice and arrogance. Tonight, the wind came, and your tree fell. The question now is, will you replant with better seeds, or will you remain among the fallen timber? She didn't answer, couldn't answer. Her throat was closed with tears and shame. As she walked into the San Francisco night, she knew her life would never be the same. Every Chinese cultural event, every business meeting, every social gathering, people would remember this night. They would remember how a waiter brought down a billionaire with nothing but truth and dignity. The next morning, the story was everywhere. Billionaire's racist rant exposed by genius waiter, read the headlines. Social media exploded with millions of views of the confrontation. Zhang Wei's company stock dropped 30% in one day. 3 major American corporations canceled their contracts with Wei Technologies. The Chinese consulate issued a statement distancing themselves from Zhang Wei's comments and praising Marcus Williams for his restraint and wisdom. Marcus woke up to hundreds of interview requests, job offers from universities around the world, and messages from thousands of people sharing their own stories of discrimination and triumph. But the message that meant the most came from a young black student in Detroit. Professor Williams, I was ready to drop out of my Chinese language program because people kept telling me I didn't belong there. After seeing your story, I'm not just staying, I'm going to become the best Chinese speaker in my university. You showed me that excellence is the best response to prejudice. Within a week, Marcus had been offered his position back at Stanford with a full apology and a promotion. Major tech companies wanted him as a consultant. Publishers wanted his autobiography. But Marcus chose differently. He kept his partnership in the restaurant, turning it into a place where important conversations about race, dignity, and justice could happen over meals. He established the Second Chances Foundation, with the money that poured in from supporters, helping people who had been falsely accused rebuild their lives. Zhang Wei, true to her word, donated $50 million to minority scholarships. She issued a public apology that seemed genuine, though only she knew if it truly was. Her business recovered somewhat, but she never again reached the heights she had once known. More importantly, she never again spoke about anyone with the casual cruelty she had shown that night. Whether from genuine change or fear of consequences, the result was the same, one less voice of prejudice in positions of power. 6 months later, at the grand opening of the restaurant's new cultural center, Marcus stood before a crowd of hundreds. In the audience sat former colleagues who had abandoned him, now seeking forgiveness. There were students whose lives he had changed, business leaders ready to learn, and even Zhang Wei, sitting quietly in the back, trying to rebuild her life and reputation. Marcus spoke about the night that changed everything, but his message was bigger than one incident. We all carry prejudices, he said, his voice reaching every corner of the room. The difference is whether we feed them or fight them. Whether we use our power to lift others up or push them down. Whether we see jobs as defining worth or recognize that every person has inherent dignity regardless of what they do for money. He looked directly at Zhang Wei as he continued, that night, I could have destroyed someone who tried to destroy me, not with false accusations but with cruel words and racist beliefs. I chose teaching over vengeance. Not because I'm a saint, but because I believe people can change. Even those who seem irredeemable can sometimes surprise us. The story of that December night became legend in San Francisco and beyond. Business schools taught it as a case study in how prejudice can destroy careers and companies. Language programs used it to show the power of linguistic knowledge. But most importantly, restaurants and service industries worldwide implemented new policies protecting workers from discrimination, policies that became known as the Williams Protocol. Marcus continued working one night a week at the restaurant, not because he needed to, but because he wanted to remember. He wanted to remember the feeling of being invisible, of being judged, of being dismissed. It kept him humble and human. And sometimes, when new customers tried to treat the staff poorly, he would emerge from the kitchen, smile that dangerous smile, and ask in whatever language they thought was private, would you like to reconsider how you're speaking to my colleagues? The last chapter of this story came 3 years later. Marcus was invited to give a keynote speech at the World Economic Forum in Davos. The topic was dignity in the global economy. As he stood at the podium, looking out at an audience of the world's most powerful people, he saw Zhang Wei in the third row. She had been invited as a reformed advocate for workplace equality, her company now known for its diverse leadership and ethical practices. Their eyes met, and she nodded with what looked like genuine respect and gratitude. Marcus began his speech with a story about a waiter and a billionaire, about assumptions and revelations, about the moment when someone realizes that the person they're stepping on might be the one who could lift them up. The audience listened in rapt attention, many shifting uncomfortably as they recognized themselves in parts of the story. Every person you meet, Marcus concluded, carries universes inside them that you cannot see. The janitor might be a poet. The driver might be a philosopher. The waiter might be a professor. Or they might be none of these things, and that's okay too. Because their worth doesn't come from hidden credentials or secret knowledge. It comes from their humanity. And the moment we forget that, we don't diminish them. We diminish ourselves. As Marcus left the stage to thunderous applause, he thought about the journey from that December night to this moment. He had lost everything, found himself serving those who looked down on him, and then rose again, not through revenge but through revealing truth. Zhang Wei had fallen from her pedestal of arrogance, crashed into the ground of humiliation, and slowly, painfully, rebuilt herself into someone better. Both of them had learned that dignity cannot be taken away by others, only surrendered by ourselves. And both had discovered that the most powerful response to prejudice isn't anger or violence, but the quiet strength of standing tall and speaking truth, even when your voice shakes, even when you're standing alone, even when the whole world seems to be laughing at you. Because sometimes, just sometimes, when you speak your truth in a language others don't expect you to know, you don't just change a moment. You change the world, one prejudiced heart at a time, one act of courage at a moment, one word of truth in an ocean of lies. And that December night in San Francisco, when a waiter spoke back to a billionaire in perfect Mandarin, the world changed just a little bit. Just enough to matter. Just enough to give hope to every person who has ever been dismissed, diminished, or discriminated against. Just enough to prove that justice, though it may take its time, eventually finds its voice. And when it does, no amount of money, power, or prejudice can silence it.